Welcome. We are a mother-daughter podcast about all things surrogacy. Together, we have brought 8 beautiful babies into this world, and we would like to share through education and knowledge about surrogacy with those who want to educate themselves on the topic. This is Stop.Sit.Surrogate. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Stop.Sit.Surrogate with Kennedy and Ellen.
Hey, everyone.
Today, we have a wonderful guest. He is a lawyer and he's here to explain some stuff and talk. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Ralph Tsong. I'm an attorney here in California. I practice in the field of assisted reproductive technology.
So is that is just for surrogacy, or that's for like what else would that cover under?
Egg donation, sperm donation, embryo donation.
I always
Okay.
forget that you
Yeah.
need legal for those.
Yeah, you do need legal, right? No adoption, though, right?
We actually do adoption. We
You
do,
okay?
yeah,
Okay,
we help with domestic adoption.
got it. Okay,
Got it.
great.
Okay. And how'd you get into the surrogacy? I know it's a small knit group, so how'd you get
Mhm.
into the surrogacy side of it all?
Well, um, I've been an attorney for over 25 years.
You don't look
Uh,
that old, Ralph.
no, it's the Asian genes. I'm a little lucky. It wasn't helpful early on in my career, of course,
Oh,
when
of
people
course.
thought I was a kid for a
Yeah.
long time. But for about 10 years, I was working with the state government, and I adopted my son from Korea in 2014, I think.
Okay.
And a friend approached me and said I should start doing adoption law. And he was encouraging me to start up my own firm practice, even though I had completely been in the government for so long.
Yeah.
And I was like an labor and employment attorney for the
Wow.
state. And I took a leap of faith and started my own practice with zero connections and little bit of experience under my belt.
Yeah.
Um, and it was a little difficult because, you have to have a lot of experience for people to come to you, at least in the field.
Right.
But surrogacy was something that was growing, and it's an adjacent type of field. So,
Okay.
Right.
and my wife and I had done IVF and frozen embryo transfers, so we're experienced with that.
Okay.
And that kind of helped, like just getting into that field. And it
Yeah.
helped also that there was a lot of international surrogacy
Mm.
pre-pandemic, and it was easy to like gear ourselves as working with a lot of international intended parents, and that's where we've been. And since then, we've had the office open for 8 years. Worked with
Cool.
thousands of clients, and people are pretty happy.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you guys take on IPs and gestational surrogates?
Yes, we do. Yeah,
Okay.
so it's about 50-50
Oh,
between the two of them. We're
Nice.
actually licensed in 6 different states. So
What are
one
they?
of the things is like California, there's a lot of attorneys, like maybe more than
yeah.
other states, because we have
Yeah.
so many surrogacy cases. But
Yeah.
we thought it'd be useful to add some other states in. I graduated law school in Chicago, so my first bar is Illinois.
Okay.
I grew up in Arizona, so I added Arizona bar.
Oh,
And Washington made surrogacy legal about 2018, so I added the bar there.
wow.
And my associate attorney is also licensed in New York and Oklahoma.
You must love taking the
Oh,
bar.
yeah.
Actually, I only had to take it twice. That's the
Oh,
thing.
Really?
Like
it's
if you,
recip
yeah, California,
Yeah.
there's no reciprocity with other states, but Illinois there is.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
Still.
So my daughter went to law school and taken that test, and that freaked her out for months.
I
Months.
know it's a it's a test of
Overwhelming.
nerves more
Yeah.
than anything,
Yeah.
almost.
Crazy.
Um, so you guys are, I mean, that's pretty well spread out through the states then, because you have some like East Coast, Midwest as well. So, but the what am I trying to say? Are they vastly different
Mm.
in what is like allowed or legal surrogacy wise?
Yeah, there are a lot of differences.
Oh, there
Like
are.
the
Mm.
the states are different in different ways. Like New York is probably the most protective of surrogates. They have
Yeah.
a requirement that
Right.
life insurance be like $1 million,
Mhm.
and health insurance has to continue to cover them for I think a year.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and some of the other
Mhm.
states, like California, is probably like the original state for surrogacy,
Hmm.
but a state like Washington, Illinois, they've added in things like the IP need to have a psych evaluation or psych consult as well. Um,
Nice.
Arizona doesn't really have any law, but it is a useful
April.
state because it's close to California and there's a lot of people living there.
Oh,
That's true.
sure. Okay.
Oh, because California doesn't have a psych requirement for IPs, correct?
No, it doesn't.
Right.
Um, I don't even, I'll have to look up whether they require one for the GC, but
They-
ASRM and other people do. Yeah.
yeah. California, they require it for the GC, right, Ken? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm
big
All
time.
the
trying to.
Yeah.
clinics, all the clinics require it. Yeah.
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 Oh, it's the clinics.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Learned something new. I thought it was just the agencies.
No, I think if you have a relative, like a relative or family member, do your surrogacy, you
Oh,
can waive the psych in
okay.
California.
Okay. If you're doing it for a family member. Got
Yeah.
it.
How do you want to transition into this, Ralph? Because last time I asked the birth order question. So it's,
So
yeah.
I guess the thing that's on everyone's mind
Yeah.
Mhm.
is probably the Trump presidency and the executive order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and it's something that we had been expecting for a while. Like I
Oh,
actually during the pandemic, like in 2020, I had a presentation because Trump had said he was going to get rid of birthright citizenship. And he didn't
Mhm.
at that time. Like he
right.
didn't issue anything. And it probably makes sense that he would do this at the beginning of his presidency because he has the full
4 year.
term for
Hmm.
it to be
Hmm.
active. And an executive order can be replaced by the next president.
Right.
Hmm.
So the executive order is called 14160, and it's protecting the meaning and value of American citizenship. Okay.
Okay.
So once this order came out, we got a lot of calls from our international intended parents as well as agencies because everyone is trying to find out, what does this mean,
Mhm.
right? What is the
Yeah.
immediate effect
Right.
if this happens? And the immediate effect is there is no immediate effect because wh- I think the day after it was filed,
Hmm.
there were lawsuits
Yep.
filed against it. And there's actually 22 states that filed lawsuits. One of them is on the East Coast and one of them's in Seattle. And
Okay.
that one has 4 states. And the ACLU is on the East Coast case as well.
Okay.
Uh, um,
Oh, sorry, Ralph.
yeah,
When there's somebody's filing the lawsuit against this, like what are they combating it? Like what does their lawsuit say? Like it's like you
They're
can't do this? Like
yeah,
it's not.
it's unconstitutional.
yeah. The
From
lawsuit says that it's unconstitutional, that it's going to violate the 14th Amendment,
right.
and people will be irreparably harmed, so it needs to be stopped. And
100%.
they
Okay.
and there needs to be a finding that it's unconstitutional.
Yeah.
So I can talk about what the executive order says.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Do,
Yeah.
I'm just gonna diverse just a little bit. Do you, just from your knowledge, you've been in practice for a really long time, do you think this is gonna be kind of stuck in the courts for a good long time, or eh?
Yeah, I think the way lawsuits work, it's
Yeah.
going to be stuck in court. So
Yeah.
right now, there's a temporary injunction in the Seattle court,
Okay.
and that is going to last for a couple weeks, and then there's going to be a preliminary injunction. The plaintiffs are requesting a preliminary injunction, and that will last until the trial. A-
Okay.
And all the indications are that the order will be found unconstitutional and any kind of injunction will be in place. But that doesn't mean, eh, eh, I mean, the things will be frozen as they are
Hmm.
until the Supreme Court hears it and decides.
Right.
So the injunction can be appealed before there's a decision in the court. And we can't really predict what's going to happen. Like we can say most legal experts think that this is going to be unconstitutional, but there's always,
Hmm.
you can never be
Mhm.
sure with the Supreme Court. They could always
Right.
say, these
Right.
aren't the right plaintiffs, they don't have standing or something like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
And they could go back, but then someone else would file a lawsuit.
Right.
So in a way, if that sort of thing happens, it might actually take longer to get resolved.
Okay.
I
So,
I think it'll take at least a year or two for us to
okay.
get a
Okay.
final decision on it.
When
Okay.
you say injunction for people who don't understand like legal jargon, that's like a halt to the order that he's trying to put in place, right? Like it's a stop that he can't
Yeah,
make it happen. Okay.
basically that the order cannot take effect.
Okay. Okay,
So
great.
what does the order say? The order
Yeah.
says that it's the policy of the US that they're not going to issue documents recognizing US citizenship when the person's mother is unlawfully present at the time of birth and the father is not a US citizen or permanent resident. That's one category. Okay.
Okay.
So that covers maybe the most common thing that people think about, that someone crosses the border, maybe they don't have a visa, or they didn't go through a port of entry, and then they have a baby, and the baby becomes a US citizen. So that's saying that category of people should not get that they could get birth certificates, they should not get passports, they shouldn't get social security numbers.
Okay.
Okay. The second category is when the mother's present is lawful but temporary, and the father is not a US citizen or permanent resident. So this category is
Okay.
specifically targeting what we call birth tourism,
Mm-hmm.
which is when someone flies to the US, they give birth, their intention is probably to grant US citizenship to their child.
Right.
And then they will probably fly home, not maybe they'll overstay or not, but then they fly home. Okay.
Yeah.
So in my opinion, well, first, there's nothing in there that mentions surrogacy, right?
Right.
There's nothing that specifically targets intended parents. And I would argue that intended parents are a different category because, well, when you target birth tourism and you target people who are undocumented,
Right.
you're trying to target chain migration. You're trying to target when people come to the US specifically just to have a baby,
Right.
and then confer benefits to the child, and then maybe get sponsorship down the road or something. And surrogacy is not really that situation because surrogacy, there are a lot of international intended parents, there are a lot of domestic intended parents, but they don't, the fact that they're coming to the US to pick up the child, and the citizenship is not the primary concern. Their concern is having a child.
Right.
They nearly everyone who does surrogacy has struggled with infertility or the inability to have a child safely on their own. So they need the assistance of a surrogate, right?
Right. So,
Eh,
but
eh,
if an international couple or parent comes, they technically, in this new order, they can't get the passport. They can't get the passport. So how can they get this child home? Like they're not wanting the citizenship, but in order to get, if I'm understanding it correctly and how I read it, the passport's the big deal, or to get over to where they need to go. So how
right.
does,
A
right?
passport is needed for
Yeah.
international travel.
Yeah.
Um, it's
So do they get caught up in this unintentionally?
it might be unintentional. It might
Uh-huh.
just be like it's a goal to stop everyone who's not
Mm.
a permanent resident
Mm.
or citizen from becoming a citizen
Wow.
automatically.
Okay.
And it's not, when we get into the historical part of it,
Yeah.
um, it doesn't really, it's not a good interpretation of the Constitution.
Yeah.
And Trump says that when he wrote this, or whoever wrote it, it says, we recognize the Dred Scott decision is wrong. And that's why the 14th Amendment was passed, right? So the Dred Scott decision, it happened before the Civil War. It's kind of the impetus of the Civil War. It said someone who's free cannot become a citizen because they're formerly a slave. And it wasn't the intent that you could become a citizen if you're formerly a slave. And that was kind of, everyone agrees that's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we had the Civil War, ended in 1865. And in 1866, they passed the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And it said, interestingly, it's before the 14th Amendment. It said all persons born in the United States and not subject to any foreign power, excluding Indians not taxed, are hereby declared to be citizens of the United States. So it was the first law, and it's still on the books.
Yeah.
It's still in the books. It still says when you're born in the US, not subject to a foreign power,
Yeah.
not a Native American who's not taxed, you're declared to be a citizen of the US.
Wow.
And
Yep.
and no one really talks about that, but we'll get to the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says a lot of things. It has the Equal Protection Clause, it has the Due Process Clause, but maybe kind of forgotten until now is the Birthright Citizenship Clause, which says all persons born and naturalized in the US and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state they reside. Okay.
Yeah.
So for the longest time, this has been interpreted to mean anyone born in the US, whether the parents are foreign or not, they're going to be a US citizen.
Right.
And actually, before the Constitution, before the Constitution was amended, uh, there was no law, but everyone was a citizen if they were born free,
Right.
you know.
Not a slave. Right.
Yeah, not a slave.
Right.
So it wasn't in the Constitution, but that was just the effect that
Hmm.
people born in the US were citizens unless they fell under some exception.
Yeah.
So Trump's argument is that there's this modifier which says you have to be born or naturalized in the US and you have to be subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So they're interpreting that this
Mm.
phrase, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, means that you are not, if you're born, if you have foreign citizen parents, you're not subject to the jurisdiction. If you're temporary resident, you're not subject to the jurisdiction of the US.
So therefore, you can't be a citizen per your birth in the U.S.
Right,
Right.
right.
Okay. Okay.
And
Yikes.
the it's an interesting argument, but
Mm.
I don't think it's a good one because fortunately there's some case law, and the big case is called US versus Wong Ark Kim. And this is from 1898. And
Jeez.
it's very interesting because it involves a Chinese man who was born in San Francisco to two Chinese nationals. And at the time, they had something called the Chinese Exclusion Act,
Mm.
which barred Chinese immigrants from ever becoming naturalized citizens. But the purpose was the railroads were built. You don't want to have more Chinese. You want to send them back, or you want them to go back.
God, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So he left the US when he was a teenager to visit his parents who moved back to China. And he went back 3 years later and he tried to get in the US by boat and they stopped him and they said, "You're not a US citizen, you can't come back. Okay, you're subject to the Chinese Exclusion Act." So
Oh.
the court actually looked at this question, like, what does the citizenship clause of the 14th Amendment mean? What does subject to the jurisdiction thereof mean? And they said, well, we looked at I think you looked at the Civil Rights Act as well, and all the people that talked about it, and it means that it's meant to exclude a very narrow category of people.
Mm.
At the time, Native Americans are not automatically citizens. They had their own semi-autonomous, autonomy. And so Native Americans are not under the citizenship clause. They're not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. It also meant people who are diplomats and
Right.
uh, kids
Right.
of the diplomats. And it
Right.
also meant people who are born under areas of the US that are under control of like a foreign invader. And
Okay.
that, I think, referred to maybe like the War of 1812. There's some places that got taken over. So if
Yeah.
someone's born and the US doesn't have jurisdiction, then that wouldn't be a US citizen.
Okay.
Okay. So that was settled law from 1898.
Wow.
And they actually had another case in 1982 called Plyer versus Doe. This one interpreted the 14th Amendment to say equal protection of the law applied to people living within the US. Okay, it didn't, because this question was, could Texas deny education, primary education to undocumented children?
Oh.
And the court, by a 5-4 decision, said no. people within the US are subject to the jurisdiction of the US. Okay, so this is what my
Wow.
reading of the law is. I think this is
Mm.
the best reading. I mean, this is the one that makes the most sense, that this language, subject to the jurisdiction thereof, is not meant to limit it to only people who are like permanent residents or citizens.
You're saying it is just limited or it isn't?
No, I said it's not, the language is not meant to limit
Okay.
to just citizens or permanent residents.
Okay. So then surrogacy would fall under with,
Well, what it means is the executive order shouldn't be valid because the
well,
executive order is
of course.
the executive order cannot state that it's a correct reading of the Constitution,
Oh, right. When
that
it's right.
someone is not, yeah,
Okay. Hmm.
if you're born
Yeah.
from someone who's visiting the US temporarily, then they should still be able to confer citizenship if the
Wow.
child's born there.
Yeah.
So it
Ooh,
seems like even if the
interesting.
yeah, even if the law, or sorry, the executive order were considered valid,
Yeah.
well,
The,
there's still an argument that it will only be valid to people who are undocumented or something like that. We'll have to
okay.
see.
Yeah. Where my head immediately went when you were talking about a mother who is a U.S. citizen. So most surrogates are, United States bound, right? And a lot of the intended parents or intended fathers are not. They're
Mhm.
international. So if she were to just act like it was, okay, I'm just having a baby, and she ends up getting a birth certificate with just her name on it, then gets a birth and gets a passport for that baby, then that baby could fly over to England or wherever
That
with
sounds
her.
like a lot of
Oh,
legal
oh, I
bad
know.
things that you're doing right now. Okay.
I'm just
Well,
looking at little loopholes, and then they would
I
have
don't,
to like adopt this baby,
Mm.
right?
well, it is possible. I mean, we have to think about the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
But even though it's very likely that this will not be held as constitutional, we have
Right.
to think about what can
What
we
if it
do?
is?
What,
Okay.
yeah. And one of the things that can be done is during COVID, all the passport offices were shut down,
Right.
Right.
right? So we had the question of what do we do if you can't obtain a passport? And it was the case that there could be like a temporary passport that could be issued by the government of the international IP,
Okay.
or that maybe the airlines would fly them without the passport.
Wow.
We'll have to see.
Yeah.
There are things,
If they had
there's a,
documentation that
That the
stated
baby is
we're in a
theirs.
surrogacy relationship right now
Yeah.
and our baby's being born. Because I remember in COVID, there were a couple of babies that ended up staying here and were
for a
either,
long time,
Yeah,
right?
for a
yeah,
long
some of the
time.
surrogates kept them, and then some of the agency owners kept them, from what I remember. Like, that's devastating for the parents who tried so hard to,
Kept, watched over. Careful with your words
watched
there.
over. Yeah, I don't mean kept, babysat, like babysat extra, extra long.
Yeah.
That's hard on everybody. Wow.
So it would be like a temporary.
Who's to say
Is
they'll
there a
leave?
possibility that like because I understand that like a passport's needed, like it's a baby. I understand that to an extent, I guess, but there's no way to get a passport, say for like if the parents are from China, like get a passport for their baby from China, right?
Well, I guess we'll have to see what
Okay.
happens. But
Yeah.
Right.
for the meantime, it seems
No.
like this will be stayed. This will be
Yeah.
not enforceable.
Okay.
And I think that they need to, they would need at least need to pass a law to get rid of the Civil Rights Act of 1866. And I think they would have to
Wow.
probably pass a constitutional amendment because I think it is settled. But it,
Yikes.
we'll have to
When
see.
you start
Yeah.
amending constitutional rights, that's a slippery slope and very, very scary.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Do you think I think I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it. Do you think that this is even possible, like to happen?
The
Like
executive order?
80, like, yeah, like 80%. likely like it's like it really just depends on the Supreme Court, right? Because one day they could just wake up and not have had their coffee. Like,
Oh God.
well, it's true.
They have to
You,
cite law.
I know, but I'm just saying
Yeah,
they
I
make
think
interesting decisions a lot.
there are interesting
Yeah,
decisions.
well, Roe v. Wade, that went out the door. Yeah, we know.
Right.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think this one is well
Tricky.
settled. But I do think it's well settled because I think
Okay.
there's a lot of literature, there's a lot of debate about the 14th Amendment and what it means.
Yeah.
And it's just historical about,
Yeah.
when the amendment was ratified, what it means. And there were
Right.
some people who are arguing, some senators said, we don't want this to include the Chinese people and Roma or things like that. Like they didn't want everyone to get the birthright citizenship, but
Right.
it didn't change. The
Right.
language didn't change, and it got
Right.
interpreted to mean what it did. So it would be a huge shift to
Huge.
change that. Roe v. Wade is not explicitly in the Constitution,
Right.
right?
Right.
So it's part of the 14th Amendment as well. But
Mhm.
there, you know, it still
Oh,
wasn't codified either. So I think it would be a huge leap for the Supreme Court to say this
yeah.
executive order is valid. Now, it is possible they could say maybe that the US is invaded or something. They could
Mm,
try to go that way, but that invasion route shouldn't cover surrogacy.
mm-mm. Right.
A-
Okay.
And we're hopeful, maybe surrogacy isn't meant to be included, right? I mean, surrogacy is economically positive for the US.
Yes. I was
It
gonna
brings
say
in
that.
a
Yeah.
lot of money when people use, do commercial surrogacy in
Sure.
the US. And they have a lot of reasons to choose surrogates in the US
Hmm.
because it's
Safe.
legal,
Yep.
safe,
Hmm.
good medicine,
Yeah.
ethical.
Yep.
Yes.
And surrogates are treated well. They have their own attorneys. They
Hmm.
don't live in a hostel with a bunch of surrogates, and they
Yeah.
live their own lives with their children and their families.
Yeah.
Yes.
So we hope that, that this is just a little bump in the road and we'll just keep moving on with
Okay.
surrogacy.
Yeah.
You did just mention, I'm going to segue actually, because you just brought up a good thing that we can segue. So you were saying how it's ethical here and that there's good medicine. Um, do you want to talk about the Affordable Care Act?
Right. So, there we also wrote about what other things might change with the
Hmm.
Trump presidency.
Right.
And the Affordable Care Act is probably one of them.
Yeah.
And at this point, we don't know whether the Affordable Care Act will be kind of wound down in terms of, not getting funding and that sort of thing, or whether it'll be repealed and replaced.
Right.
And I think the campaign promises might have been to repeal and replace,
Mhm.
and it's certainly always been one of Trump's desires to get rid of the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Uh, the Affordable Care Act has actually been very important for surrogacy,
Yeah.
and it might not be super well known, right? But
Mhm.
there's a lot of policies that exclude surrogacy as surrogacy pregnancy from being covered. And the Affordable Care Act is an opportunity for surrogates who are uninsured or who have an unfriendly policy to find a friendly policy. And those policies are paid for by the intended parents, typically. The out of pocket should be paid for.
Right.
Um, and that provides a lot of assurance for both people, both parties, both that they're going to be covered and that the healthcare costs are not going to go out of control,
Okay.
right?
Right.
Right.
And so the Affordable Care Act, one of the big things that it does is it recognizes pre-existing conditions,
Mhm.
and everyone is in the same pool. So that means we have the unhealthy people and the young healthy people are all together. And surrogates do have higher medical expenses if they do become pregnant and deliver a baby. They're not unhealthy, but they are in the more expensive category.
Right.
So one of the things that's discussed in terms of, at least by JD Vance, is that they do intend to create more choices, and they think by making more choices, offering more choices, then they'll have lower premiums for people. But the way you can do that, and the way they probably would do that, is create different risk pools.
Right.
So that means maybe women will be in one risk pool and men will be in another. Women have higher healthcare needs over the cost of their lives, including through pregnancy.
Yeah.
It could be that people who have pre-existing conditions will be put in a separate pool than people who don't.
Okay.
So if you do that, for some people, the premiums will be cheaper. And then for other people, the premiums are going to be more or possibly prohibitively expensive. It
Yeah.
might not be possible for an insurance company if they only have the people in the pre-existing pool that they will be able to offer them coverage. I don't know what's going to happen to those guarantees and
Right.
the non-discrimination parts of the Affordable Care Act. But I do think we'll probably see some legislation in the future, and we can always think about, what that does. But I do expect that there will be different. That will be one of the things they do if they don't get rid of Affordable Care Act completely and not replace it. It's just have different pools, and if they do that, it might make right now surrogates who are pregnant, when the open enrollment comes around, they can enroll and their premium is going to be the same price as someone who's not pregnant.
Right.
But what will their premium and what will their deductible be if they are pregnant, right?
Right.
So it is
Wow.
something to think
Lot.
about,
Yeah.
like something to watch out for. And I would, I guess it's an encouragement for people. Surrogacy is definitely, this is probably one of the best times to do surrogacy if you're
Right.
thinking about it.
That's what I was gonna say. Like, is there like a bit? No, we don't know this yet because it's only been like a week or two or two. Like
Yeah,
a big influx of like, okay, here's the push. All these international people are coming. We need surrogates. There's a push, and there's always a push on social media for, well, we need surrogates. We need surrogates. But I'm really wondering if this, because people are going to try to get in under the Affordable Health Act being changed, possibly any amendments to the 14th Amendment or to the Constitution or for his executive order. I
yeah,
Heart of hearts is telling me it might be a little dangerous just because they're going to try it. Okay, you're pregnant, you had a baby. Okay, a month later, boom, get pregnant, do it again. Like that's what I'm afraid of. That cycle instead
I
of waiting
can't tell
6
you. Yeah, I can't tell you if intended parents are being discouraged or
Yeah.
not. Um, but I do think that
Yeah.
people shouldn't lose
Yeah.
faith in the U.S. justice system as well as the laws
Not
in
yet.
this country. I
Yeah.
think
It's
that,
hard right now.
yeah,
It's there's so much up in the air, right, Ralph? Like so many executive orders came down the pike and you're like, "What?" I
I
mean, I
think it
can't even
was
decipher all of them.
there've
Yeah.
been 45 executive orders, right?
So many. So many.
Well,
Yeah.
there's definitely
And
some
and
I have not heard of.
and
Oh,
I think in a way, surrogacy is one of the least affected things so far. I mean, right?
totally. Yeah.
A lot of people are being affected by different things,
Yeah.
and surrogacy is indirectly being affected right now. But
Right. Not purposefully. Yeah.
but
Right.
yeah,
Yikes.
Yeah. Oh my
Let's keep your
gosh.
fingers crossed.
Yes. Thank you for all the breakdowns. Can I ask you some like surrogate lawyer questions?
sure.
Okay. Okay. Let's see. What should we start with? Oh, well, this is a great one. So, what should people look for, surrogates or IPs, when it comes to finding a lawyer?
So some states there's a lot of lawyers, in some states there's not so many lawyers, and I think
Mm.
a lot of people immediately think like, well, we're kind of the same, right? And so I'll just go with whoever's the cheapest lawyer.
Oh.
We don't really. I mean, I don't recommend that. I
Hmm.
mean, it's seldom that when we have choices, we always, gravitate towards the cheapest. And, you know, we have a lot of experience doing surrogacy, and surrogacy is something that does change unexpectedly. Like what happens when the ACA changes and or something like that. So we really have to be on top of it. You need to find a specialist. You need to find someone who does many, many of these cases and keeps abreast of whatever changes
Right.
are happening. And so we can be able to advise our clients when something goes wrong, what to do. And we have like you know, we are always successful in getting our parentage orders. No one has an issue where the judge is going to deny it. And I think the parentage is really important, that's why you do surrogacy. You're going to be the parent, right? So for intended parents, you want to look at the success rate. Are they successful negotiating client at the contracts, or be successful getting the parentage orders on time?
Okay.
For surrogates, I think you want to look at someone who you're comfortable with and who can really explain the contract in a way you understand. And also like looks at, what are things that should be standard in the industry, right? Like
Yeah.
we sometimes represent surrogates in independent cases. And,
Mm.
there's not so much handholding when you don't have an agency if you're not an experienced surrogate. So we will
Right.
advocate for an escrow if you're not like a close friend, because a lot of the disputes, the cases that become case law that's cited in the California contracts that have to do with someone not making payments. The intended parents decide to stop paying.
Oh, yeah.
So escrow, I think, is very important. You also want to make sure the surrogate is protected after the medical expenses are paid after the delivery. If there's complications, also the escrow remains open
Okay.
before the medical bills are paid. Things like that. You gotta, you know, we always assume the worst. I know attorneys are not popular because
Aw.
You prepared.
we do prepare.
Yeah.
Is there a certain organization that surrogacy lawyers can be affiliated with that kind of maybe will have vetted you and it would make somebody looking for an attorney for this type of transaction feel more
Yeah,
comfortable that you're part of that?
uh, there's actually maybe five
Okay.
organizations.
Oh.
We're in Quad A, which is the Academy of Adoption, and I don't know if they say art or assisted reproductive attorneys,
Okay.
and that's a invitation. We have to be accepted into the academy.
Hmm.
I'm in the Academy of California Adoption and Art Lawyers. Also, something that we have to apply to and get in.
Wow.
Uh, we recommend lawyers, they should be part of the ABA. There's an art committee.
Okay.
That's the American Bar Association. There's
Hmm.
also the SEEDS, which is the
Yeah.
Society for Ethics in Egg Donation and Surrogacy, and there's also the ASRM. So we're in all five organizations.
Okay.
Oh,
Okay.
wow. There you go.
Woohoo.
Well, look at that. Um, okay. Let's see. Oh, yeah. Because I change things in my contracts. Um, so I know others do too. And I'm sure both sides are a little bit timid at times because they don't want to step on anybody's toes. But what would you say is like some of the common things that are changed? Or yeah, like oh, you know what? And then I have another question, but I'm gonna forget, so I'm gonna write it down.
Okay.
Okay.
So I guess there's a lot of things that people disagree about, and maybe they're not completely hashed out. Could be the termination provision,
Mm.
under what
Yeah.
conditions there's a termination of pregnancy, or selective reduction.
Right.
Vaccines are an issue for a lot of people because some people are vaccine reluctant, and some people are vaccine positive. So
Mhm.
we see that changes are made there.
Okay.
It's also, I would say, the number three change is probably nails.
Oh, like getting your nails done?
Yes, getting your
I've had
nails
that in one of
done,
mine.
and
Really?
and hair dye and permanence.
Okay. Hair
In
dye. Yeah,
case,
I've heard that one, but I didn't know
yeah,
about nails.
yeah. So nails are probably one of the most common things that we see special requests from surrogates. They want to
Mhm.
keep their nails.
Yeah.
Intended parents would prefer that there's no nail polish, no gel nails, acrylic nails, but
Hmm.
gel nails, that kind of gets in there a lot of times.
Okay.
Uh,
Many.
Travel restrictions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a big one.
So a lot of contracts have restrictions about when you can travel out of state or travel, like say 100 miles from your hospital.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And we always ask our surrogates, like, do you have travel planned, you have
Right.
grandparents in some other state or something, we need to think about what to do because we do sometimes hear someone's requesting to travel and then that travel is going to get denied. So we want to put that in the contract if it's possible.
Yeah.
Get that. Okay, this is the question I've been dying to know. Okay, when it comes to the contract, I've had several different lawyers over my times, and they're
Yeah.
all different contracts. But then some of it is the same. Is there like a draft going around out there that you guys like pull from? Like I'm like so curious, or do you come up
well,
with your own?
well, we do come up with our own, but there's only
Okay.
so many ways you can say something, right?
Right.
So it does, I mean, that's probably why a lot of them seem similar. I mean,
Okay.
and there is a good way to structure it, right? It does seem to make sense more. You talk about certain, restrictions here, and then you talk about the escrow, and then you talk about the
Yeah.
medical expenses and so on. Um, there's not a group that workshops it, and a lot of attorneys they protect their contracts. Like
Yeah.
they don't want
Oh.
someone to just copy it
Right.
because we've developed ourselves.
Interesting. Because
Yes.
there
Yeah.
are, I've seen contracts as short as like I think like 35 pages. And then like I had like 120 one time and I was like, what? I don't even know what all this is. Like this was so much information.
Well, that might be a record. I don't
Yeah.
think I've
It
seen
was crazy. It was
120.
crazy. I don't even know what I still have it. But like it was a lot of pages and it's just very interesting because obviously all of what's needed to be said is in them. I was just curious why some are short and some are so long.
Well, we try to make it simple,
Yeah.
and not repetitive because you
Yeah.
can say the same thing multiple times just to get the page count up or something.
Oh,
I mean,
Yeah.
and I'm happy to review whatever length the contract is, but it is nice to see one that is succinct and still covers everything.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
for
Exactly.
sure.
Exactly. Let me pull up my questions again. Oh, okay. Um, w- this is a better way to ask it. What are signs that a negotiation is going to have problems?
Mm.
It's a kind way
Yeah.
to
Oh,
ask.
yeah.
Hmm.
So
Can
I'm
you
not
see
gonna,
the
yeah.
signs? You
Of course we can see the science
Oh.
because we get the unfiltered we get the unfiltered emails and calls from the distressed client who
Oh
says,
my
"Why
God.
is
Oh
this in
boy.
here?" Something
That's
like
hilarious.
that.
Oh
Yeah.
boy.
I would say the number one sign is probably someone is a micromanager.
Oh,
Mm.
sure.
Someone. So
Mhm.
yeah, you want to make sure this is a contract to work with someone for a year or more, and it can't be terminated once you're pregnant.
Mm.
So
Right.
you want to make sure you have good vibes with your intended parents, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Especially if there's not an agency. Some people have hands-on intended parents and they love it. They love
Mhm.
the friendship that they can have and the
Yeah.
shared experience. And then some people are less trustful, right?
Mm.
They might assume the worst. It's kind of like dating, right?
Yeah.
There's red flags when you date.
Yep.
So
There are
funny.
people who are, they text too much. They
Yeah.
can't, you don't text back right away. They're going to
Right.
Mhm.
get anxious or something, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
Um, so trust is,
Oh
I
my
think, the
God.
biggest thing. You don't want someone who's jealous, right?
Right.
Ralph, where were you in my last journey? I swear. You could have
But
told
yeah,
me all
everyone's
the red
human, and
flags.
we hope that,
Yeah.
you have a good mental health professional that can help
Mm.
and, talk to their feelings if that's an issue. But
Since
I
you
would
mentioned
say,
that, if somebody, say an agency, I've been with an agency that doesn't have a mental health. I mean, this was a long time ago, but it didn't have like a mental health person on call for
yeah.
me or something like that. What if your surrogate is looking for that? Like, can she come to you and ask if she's independent? I know agency wise she might go to the agency, or is that something that she needs to ask her lawyer? Like, I don't know how that would work.
So as a lawyer, you sign up to review a contract with us, but we still offer support. Like
Right.
and um, if there's some issue with the intended parents or the surrogate, you can always write to us and tell us or call us. We can interpret the contract for you. We can write a letter
Mm.
to their attorney or something. We can write a letter that's saying they're in breach. That we try to avoid that, but you know, give people a chance to cure the breach if it's curable.
Right.
Um, so I definitely think, yeah, you don't forget about the attorney. We see on the message board forums, people get into these horror stories about, maybe they're getting not they haven't been paid for a long time, or the intended parents are unreasonable with when they go to the doctor or something. Get your
Mm.
attorney involved. I mean, if there's an
Yeah.
agency, your agency can help, but the attorney, that's the next resort, right?
Yeah, you would hope. But yes. No, I just
Mm.
I just speak from experience there. Oh, this is great. How do you resolve big disagreements in the contract? Oh, in the contract phase. Yeah.
So one of the things I learned was when you have a disagreement or you're modifying the contract, it's always best to say why,
Okay.
right?
Huh?
If you give the why, then the other side can understand where you're coming from. Like if you just start changing something,
Okay.
Right.
people can think, oh, this is unreasonable, and we're going to reject it. But if you say why, you're giving them a reason, you're
To think
explaining why you're
about it.
thinking this way, and maybe you
Right.
get closer to finding a
A happy
compromise
medium.
if
Yeah.
it's, yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's the best advice I've ever heard. Give
The
the
why.
why.
Yeah.
Because what this is my fourth journey, and so um yeah, this is I'm just gonna say it. Ralph, you're my lawyer. And you are the only one, but you're the only lawyer that I had that was like, why do you want to change this? And at first I was like, because. But then you were like, no, you have to explain why. And I'm like, okay. And once I gave you the reason, you're like, okay, and you went back and it was very easy to figure it out. I was never asked the why before, and I got a lot of pushback, and there was a lot of drama that came with it.
Yep.
So best advice I've ever heard.
The why.
I think it resolves a lot of agreements and maybe people jumping into their positions, right? Like
Yeah.
if you don't know why, you're gonna make an assumption that
Yes.
they're just trying to get the most money, or they're not serious about this journey or something like that. They just
Yeah.
want to do unhealthy things or whatever. But no, if you
Right.
say so, we do get some interesting. We have a pretty broad activity restriction in our contract, and that's kind of the standard thing, because like if the surrogate doesn't have an objection to it, then that's okay, right? Right?
Right.
Then everyone's in agreement. But we see it modified a lot, and we tell our intended parents when we review it with them, hey, they could have some, they could be in like a softball league or something like that, or they something is meaningful to them. Someone, I think we've
Right.
had roller derby,
Oh,
kickball,
I love
things
it.
like that, and then
Mhm.
like we got like a explanation like why this is still safe and how what they're going to do
Look at
to be
that.
safe, to
Yeah.
and in a way I guess that you learn more about the other party when they
Yeah.
they make modifications to the contract like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it also comes from I mean, to me it would be like it's coming more so from like the heart, like this is why this is like it's like more genuine in your reason of giving it rather than just like because I want to be in control. Like that's not it.
Yeah.
1,000,000%. Like no.
Well, and then there's also the side where maybe the surrogate doesn't want to really give the reason, that it's not that it's a bad reason, but maybe it's just like, well, why do you need to know? I'm going to be safe about this.
Mm.
But to both of your points, I think giving a little bit more info would smooth out any negativity that might be
Yeah.
brewing there. It
and
sounds like
I,
a really good idea.
and I think it's good too, because when we do see changes, sometimes intended parents, they say, is this the lawyer pushing the change or is this the surrogate? And we always tell our surrogates, whatever we say is confidential and privileged. You're not supposed to tell anybody what we talk about. And
Right.
if the agency or the IP are asking you directly, hey, did you make this change? Are you serious about this change? Or, we don't really want a situation where Like they're saying, well, the surrogate says she actually doesn't want this change, right?
Oh,
And then, it's just we're, I know the attorneys, we might seem like an obstacle to getting towards the last step, right? The last step
mhm.
of getting the injectable medicine, the legal clearance.
Right.
But I think we do serve an important role in that we make sure that everyone
Yeah.
understands what they're really signing up for.
Yeah, a
100%.
huge role.
Yes, huge role.
I would,
Huge.
I mean, I was lucky enough that my sister was a lawyer and could break down when my past lawyers wouldn't break it down for
Oh,
me. So
really?
she would break it down and be like, okay, this just means this and this word is this. Like, because there's so much legal jargon that I'm like, I don't understand half of what this is saying. I think that's the overwhelming part a lot of the
It
times
is.
for people reading it because it's like, wait, what does that mean? And then like you just get overwhelmed because you're like, wait, I don't understand. So. But yeah, you guys are extremely important and
Hmm. To both
independent
sides.
or yeah,
Uh-huh. To
independent
both
or
sides.
agency. Like you
Yeah.
each need your own lawyer.
But the
100.
independent parents too, that like to try and do this without a lawyer. Oh, I don't even know how you could navigate. I don't even know how you could do it. But maybe some do.
Yeah,
Terrifying.
Their
we
rights need
definitely,
to be protected.
yeah, we encourage independent intended parents to talk to a lawyer very early
Good.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for
because
sure.
we're on those Facebook message boards,
Uh,
Mhm.
and it seems like someone will say, I'm an intended parent, I'm looking for a surrogate, and they'll say the reasons, they'll say whatever their history was. And then
Okay.
they'll get approached by a lot of people who might be
mhm.
catfishing them, or they could be
Right.
someone from another country who might actually want to do a surrogacy, but it's just not practical. It's
Right.
not so talk to an attorney before you really get into that. And it can help a lot.
Yeah.
100%.
Yes.
Ralph, if people would like to work with you or get more information from you, where can they find you or contact you?
Well, I'm on the web. um, it's songlaw.com, starts with a T.
Okay.
We have an Instagram account that we post a lot of stuff. We have a blog that's almost every week, and we post quite frequently about surrogacy related topics. So we definitely encourage people to follow us on Instagram. We do have a TikTok, which is more like whatever we're doing, you know.
Sure.
Um, but we're definitely on social media, so you can find us there.
Okay,
Nice.
great. I'll put them all in the show notes. That way everybody can find you guys. Is there
Anything else you?
anything
Yeah.
else? I think we covered a lot.
Yeah. Well, last time we covered liens, but I
Oh,
think
that's right. Oh, that's right.
we
That's right.
have
Do
a
you want
few
to,
minutes.
yeah, do
Yeah.
you want to
So,
go over that real quick?
Loser.
so one of the things that I'm kind of interested in is the liens.
Yeah.
So liens are probably an hour-long topic if we
Ah,
want to talk about it. But
They're the worst.
basically, yeah, in California and some other states like Oregon, Washington, Colorado, Hawaii, uh, there are these things called liens, which
Mhm.
you'll probably see in the contract because I'll discuss it. And it says if there's a lien, the intended parents will have to cover the lien.
Right.
And and it has to do with medical insurance. So some medical insurance companies, they don't exclude surrogacy pregnancies, but they do say we're going to have a right to a lien or subrogation or something like that. And it means we can look at what the surrogate's contract says for her compensation,
wow.
and we can make a lien, which
So
is
crazy.
some number that's based on the compensation. It could be 100% of the compensation. It could be some percent of the compensation. 33 is what Kaiser does in
Mhm.
California. I think some are
Blue Cross Blue Shield
100%.
is
Yeah.
100. Yep.
Well, Blue Shield, not Blue Cross Blue
Oh,
Shield.
sorry,
But
Blue
yeah,
Shield. Weren't they called that at one time? No, am I crazy?
there's
I'm
a
crazy.
there's like a different company.
Different
Yeah.
company.
Yeah,
Too close. Okay.
yeah.
Blue
But
Shield.
Wow. 100%.
uh
Yeah.
so what does that mean? It means if the surrogate is making like say 50,000, then it means that if it's 100%, they could say we're going to charge whatever's in we could charge up to 50,000 for the medical expenses for the child. Not the child, but for the delivery and the hospitalization, right?
And that's on top. Is that on top of like the healthcare policy? So like the
And
intended
top of
parents
the
purchase a
premium,
healthcare, right?
It's on top of the monthly premium, but not on top of like the deductible. It's kind of a
Okay.
replacement
Oh,
of an out-of-pocket maximum.
what?
Yeah, so
Oh,
the thing is, we looked at the liens in all the states that have them, and we looked at the laws, and there's actually no law that says you have a right to lien surrogacy.
Mm.
No one says that. Instead, they say the law in California is you can lien up to 33% of a judgment or a settlement. And that was intended to
Settlement.
limit, if you had a
Workers' comp.
accident, workers'
Hmm.
comp,
Hmm.
auto accident,
Hmm.
you might have a settlement or an award, and
Sure.
then you have medical expenses, so the hospital could get payment at a higher percentage. Um,
Okay.
so it's not meant to cover surrogacy. Another thing,
Okay.
not meant to cover surrogacy.
Right. So how
mm.
are they getting it in? How are they? Is
But
there
they
a
get in through the
loophole?
contract. They get it
But
in through
that
the
seems illegal.
policy. Well, I do agree. I think it is illegal. And my reasoning that it's illegal is that it discriminatorily affects intended parents, who are the
Yeah.
ones who pay for it, and the intended parents are either going to be maybe a single individual, can't get
Right.
pregnant on their own,
Hmm.
single male or a gay couple.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be able to get pregnant on their own. It could be a disabled person. A
Wow.
disability is infertility, includes infertility. It
Okay.
could be someone who's over 40.
Wow.
It could be someone who's single as
Yeah.
well. So all of those things, I think, are protected categories in California,
Mhm.
some other states as well.
God.
So I think there's a good claim potentially that it's illegal discrimination by treating people differently. Whether
Yeah.
it's unintentional or not, it does affect the category of people.
100%. Yeah.
And there is something going on. We have something called the Insurance Access and Equity Alliance. It's something that
Even that.
the art community is trying to do to
Mm.
uh, get a law passed that will exclude surrogacy from these kind of
Mm.
contractual liens.
Ooh. Yay.
Is there anything that outsiders can do to help, like a petition to sign or something?
Well, you can go to iaealliance.org and you can, I think the memberships are like $10 or something like that. You can join that. That money will go towards lobbying. If
Okay.
you do have, if you are personally affected by a lien in California and you've already had the baby, and you think you fall under one of those protected categories, you can also contact me because we are trying to get complaints together.
Wow.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Wow.
Well, good. I'm glad something's kind of in the
Happening.
pike for that one. It
Yeah.
just doesn't seem fair, you
No.
know?
yeah,
Is is the baby covered under, once the baby's born, it goes under the parents, but the birth of the baby and the baby, that's like the surrogates policy, right?
yeah,
Okay. Okay.
and they are going to charge not like the normal price,
Right.
right?
No.
Because it's going to be like a higher price if it's
Exactly.
right.
Oh,
It's almost like you're out of
yeah.
network, or it's, yeah, and you're,
Yeah, it's like a
yeah,
cash,
right.
non-negotiated cash
Cash.
price,
Yeah.
basically.
Right. So
So,
even if your surrogate was like the picture of health, had a great, didn't even use any medication, had an hour labor, was out of the hospital in 22 hours, baby was great, they can still go as high as they want on that lien where their cap is, right?
well, I can't say it'll be necessarily getting to the cap, but it's probably going to be higher than what you would
Yeah.
have paid if it were covered by
Wow.
insurance,
Right. Okay.
because
Still
it won't
unfair.
be the
Yeah.
same type of billing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's
Wow.
taking an advantage
That's
of
unfair.
very vulnerable people.
Yeah. It's really sad.
Yeah.
It's very, very sad.
Wow. Wow. Okay, well, I'll put that link in the show notes too, because
Yeah.
wow. And thank you for explaining that, because so many people, like,
Yeah.
I didn't understand it until a little while ago, but like it's a very complicated thing to understand why this is happening all of a sudden. Because
Yeah.
I think my first two for sure there was no lien. My last journey there might have been a lien, but I know there is this time, and I'm just absolutely floored by it.
And the interesting thing is
Yeah.
only surrogacy is treated differently. So like if it were like adoption,
Wow.
or you know,
Really?
only surrogacy is singled out like that. It's
Well,
weird. Like
that's
why?
discrimination.
Yeah, I think there's a lot to think about, like
Yeah.
whether that, you know,
No, no.
Falls
Yeah.
under legality. Yeah. I
yeah,
know.
Jeez. And the fact
Yeah.
that they can look at your contract. I don't
Right.
give you permission to look at my
Right.
I
confidential
know that.
contract with my lawyer.
Right.
Like that's
It's a little bit of
questionable.
invasion of privacy right there because that's your contract. That's lawyer
Yeah.
uh, client
Yeah,
privilege, right?
attorney-client
Yeah.
privilege.
Yeah.
Right.
Huh. Wow. Do
Huh.
they literally get the um whole contract, or do they just get the page that shows what the base is? They get the whole thing?
Because they want to make sure that's the whole thing.
They get my whole
I'm
contract?
sorry.
Well, sometimes they're redacted, but you're not your
Oh,
name,
okay.
But
right?
still, no,
Yeah.
but still, like it's still
Dang.
information that's like how
Yeah.
wow, that's wild. That's wild. That's wild. That they
So
can ask.
yeah,
I have my own
do
thoughts on
talk if
this.
you do have like a legislative connection,
Yeah.
I
try to
wish.
talk to them
Yeah.
and right, right. But
I wish.
we 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 can get it changed, and or we can get
Yeah.
the law clarified that it doesn't cover
Yeah.
surrogacy.
I can
Yeah.
understand. I'm not saying I'm trying to put it all on the workers' comp. I worked in workers' comp for years. I can
Hmm.
understand that aspect of it. I can. Because usually, lawyers involved and they're suing for a lot of money because they're disabled now or what have you. So that makes sense because they may have not gotten paid. The insurance may have not gotten their
Yeah,
fair share. Makes sense.
sometimes it's like uninsured
Oh.
Yeah.
injured people, so they need to
Right.
the hospital wants to get paid for the services they provided.
But with a pregnancy,
Yeah.
you're already paying these exuberant premiums now. I mean, when I did it, the premiums were super low, and I had like a private plan. It was crazy. But now they're super high, just for like an HMO. They're ridiculous. And then on top of that, to go with a lien
Yeah,
and out of pockets. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, it's a lot.
and because it's not based on the law, it could affect eventually it could affect everyone. It could affect every state if it's not we don't put a stop to it, right?
Yep, yep.
Hmm.
It's like that snowball rolling down the hill. Wow.
Yeah, one thing after
I don't
another
know.
here.
Jeez.
What'd you say?
Actually,
I said one thing after another here.
Yeah,
Nevada did successfully pass a law to prohibit
they did.
employers from treating surrogacy differently. That means including denying coverage as well as having liens.
Way to
Good.
go, Nevada.
Yeah.
Way to go.
Come and talk to California.
Yeah.
California used to be the premium state for surrogacy. I'm
Yeah.
thinking other states are jumping us. They're New York has, like you were talking about, they
Uh,
protect their surrogates like nobody's business.
Yep.
And it's kind of new there. It's kind of newly been legalized there, right? It's not
mhm.
been on the books for a long time. So I don't know. Hmm.
We'll see how this goes.
One thing just
Yeah.
goes over everybody. I don't know. Whatever.
Oh my gosh. Well,
Oh,
thank you. You have given us so
yes.
much to talk and think about.
Very informative. And you
Well, it's a
explained it into
pleasure.
a way that where everybody's going to get it. Like,
Yeah.
yeah, very helpful. Very helpful to
You've
break it down
explained
the way
it in
you did.
in like
Layman's
normal
terms. Yeah.
human terms, like for all of us out here.
Layman's.
Well,
Non-lawyer terms.
it's always a pleasure to talk with you guys.
Oh, thank
Thanks.
you. Thank you so
Good stuff.
much.
Have a good
Okay.
evening. Thank
Yeah,
you.
you too.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Wow.
Very informative.
That was so much.
But he broke it down so nice.
And within an hour, can I add?
Did he? Oh, wow. That was great.
Holy,
was
that was
great.
like 3 massive topics with some
And he was
sprinkled questions.
worried about his energy level. He's on top of it. Like,
I
I'd like
know.
to see him when he's like fully charged.
I know.
Like, go, Ralph. Like,
I know. So funny.
Very
But
sweet.
wow, yeah, that's a lot to think about and everything
Yeah.
that's going on. And you're right, there is a lot of what's up in the air that's like
Scary.
that people have to like literally just like guess if it falls here, we have to do this. If it falls there, we have like they have to be prepared in so many different ways.
And so many of these executive orders have been signed that it's just people are just
I didn't know it was 45.
it's just it's like a boom 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 and you don't have time to process all of them.
Mm-mm.
and people are doing the lawsuits against some and trying to figure out if others need it. And it's a
Jeez.
lot. And to be honest with you, it's being, to me, it's being purposefully done so that some things will fall through the cracks.
Come on, Ellen. Let's not get too political here,
We're
but we
not,
share
we're
the
just
same.
sharing, just
I
a
know.
little opinion. Just a
I
little
know.
opinion. It's fine.
I know. But it is unfortunate because there are certain things that these executive orders, they're going to affect
Innocent people. And
yeah,
just,
like accidentally, the wrong things are going to get caught up in it. Like it's just
I
like
understand the main
some of
one,
them.
the one we talked about, I understand the reason he wrote the executive order. I do
Oh,
understand
for
it.
the birth
For the birthright,
citizenship thingy.
birthright, the citizen's birthright, yeah. But it needs to be very well defined. It cannot have this broad range to it. It needs to be very defined, and the exclusions that should be in it need to be written. It's just too
yeah.
broad.
But
It's too much.
that's how all legal things go. Anyways,
Well,
we're
yeah.
not a legal podcast.
We're not.
This is
We're just
affecting so many.
Yeah.
The Liens one is wild, but
Yeah,
yeah.
it's
So
crazy.
everything will be in the show notes for everybody if you guys want to figure out how you guys can help more. Ralph is great. You guys can always
Wonderful.
message him and talk to him, and yeah, they're very
Thank you,
responsive over there.
Ralph. Thank you.
So if anybody has any questions or stories they would like to share, please feel free to reach out to us on Instagram at Stop.Sit.Surrogate or at our email at Stop.Sit. Oh my gosh. Or at our email at Stop.Sit.Surrogate@gmail.com. I did not make this easy to say.
That's been another edition of Stop, Sit, Surrogate with Kennedy and Ellen. Thanks, everybody. Bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to give us a like and subscribe. Also, check out the link to our YouTube channel in the description. And be sure to also check out our children's book, My Mom Has Superpowers, sold on Amazon and Etsy.